Good afternoon. It's a gorgeous sunny afternoon. So I was just, as I was pre-setting up the camera, I was loving this three-dimensional shadow that this is casting, and actually that's quite relevant to what I was actually going to be chatting about today, was actually three-dimensional breathing. So I quite liked, as I was setting up this lovely shadow that's being cast on there. So welcome. I'm Heather from Energy Body, and I'm recording this for the Rosendale Wellbeing Weekend at a little bit short notice as well. So I'd like to introduce to you a little bit about what we do, but what I'd like to acknowledge that the reason also that we've got this opportunity to do this live and online is because of these strange times that we're in, of what's going on globally and how that has impacted on us. And this is an opportunity for great change, and I'm aware that for many people, including myself, that this period of time has brought about a huge amount of stress. We are talking as well about our mental well-being, and many of you will know Maria Baistow, a friend of mine, who does Rosendale Radio and does a session every week on mental health. And I was on there a few weeks ago. And what we were discussing was that the mind-body connection is a little bit misleading in the first place, because to talk about that there's a connection, it means that there's been a disconnection, and actually there isn't two things to disconnect from. We are actually a thinking body, and the science world as well as the philosophical world is still in huge, deep conversation and research. They don't actually know where specifically the mind is located. Yes, the brain is in your head, but where the mind is not located into one place. We are a thinking body. Actually, to give you an experience of that, many years ago, I had an experience when I was sat in very deep present moment awareness. And I had an instantaneous awareness of being here, and I could perceive the world all around. So it's very interesting. It's obviously not eyes, it's not my eyes, it's not my ears, but there was a sound, and it became very apparent that that's when it was, when I had this awareness that my head and all this was way above me. And the thing is the minute the watcher or the thinker comes in, I was snapped right out of it. And that's the thing, that is that deep present awareness. And if you talk to or research many indigenous cultures, and they've done anthropologists, if you ask them, where is your sense of I? I mean, it's not all the same for some indigenous cultures, because that's a different concept altogether, is I. But often when you ask them to things, they will point to here, whereas if you ask that question to many in the Western world, they sense that who you are and where you primary from is here. This is where, but it's letting go that this is the thing. It's in the Western world that this is where we think from. So, bearing that in mind, that this is here, I would then like to talk a little bit about different ways of being mindful and mindfulness. So we have close focus, which is inward, very close, and you're staying very present inside your own body, and you're staying with often one point of focus. So that could be the sensation of the breath. And there's many things that you can notice about the breath. That could be the temperature of the air, the sensation through your nose, the sensation in the movement in your body. So that could be one thing. It could be a heightened awareness of everything within your body. In Energy Body, we teach somatics, and that's another word for somatics. So your soma is your internal awareness of your own body, or another word we use for that is somanaut, which is your internal astronaut. So you're exploring your internal, deep space. So that's close focus, awareness is one way of doing this. If actually, I'll explain that in a minute. Second, we'll come back to that. So the next way of having being very deeply present and mindfulness is open focus. So you're out and back. So often it's good to practice close focus first. That's easier, not easier. That can bring a more direct, and it's a way to learn to focus. Okay, so sometimes when you go into open focus, where you're aware of everything around in your space, another way to practice that is out in nature. And again, relating to your own body senses. So the colours that you see, the smells, sort of like the sense of breeze or sun on your skin, that can bring, and then sort of really being present with what's around you. That's a good practice to people if they have trauma or they're not able to relate to inside, if that brings anxiety. So if there's anorexia, other problems that abuse or anything within the body, open focus is a much better way to keep that present moment and focus. So that's open focus. The next one is one that we talked about just at the beginning, which is heart focus and the intelligence, and it's a really different sensation of coherence. And when you stay present and focusing in your heart and resting and being, it tends to then, it will change the brain waves that are happening. So we often in normal states, everyday living, will be in beta wave patterns. But when we come into heart focus or present moment focus, our brainwave patterns will then go into alpha state. And this brings a real coherence, a clarity of thoughts, being in the flow, being able to present. So have you ever had those moments where you're trying to work something out and it's probably something, and often it goes the opposite way around and we're in beta state and the mind is overthinking. And then if you go out and move, it's again thinking body, go out and move down, so go in the shower is a good one to hear people go out for a walk. Then bringing your mind to present awareness. What happens then is you get into alpha state, and that is a different brain pattern where you suddenly then get the problem solving, and without even thinking about it, poof, it's like those, it all becomes clear, and you can get into this state where they call it in the flow, in the zone, where that comes to you more and more often. There's a real clarity of moving around in your life with that whole present moment. And clarity thoughts. It's a lovely zone and place to be in when you're accessing that, and that is the benefit of practice of being in that sort of that, having that coherence. So that's 3, and then the last one is intent. So then are you bringing intent? So people can be mindful about anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what that is. Doing is actually going to be what's trying to come to mind there is in the army and stuff, they can be incredibly very focused, but that's not necessarily with compassion or good intent for what's happening. So intent, and right now what we're looking at doing is creating, we've got this opportunity in the world where we're being pushed and we're into a huge amount of fight and flight freeze response. So we're trying to pull ourselves out of that into coherence, present moment, to calm our system down, so we're in rest and restore, and our vagus nerve, which allows us to be in this place to create change. And right now that's what the world needs, is change, and we can't solve a problem with the same thing that created it. So it's this overthinking mind. So along with those things in terms of with intent, the intent is, you hear a lot of this in the world of like manifesting. So those of you who are familiar with the spiritual world of manifestation, they talk about intent, but you have to really be aware of all those stages beforehand. And that focus of intent also comes from the heart, and it's a sense of feeling. And feeling, again, is very different from emotion. Emotion and feeling is not the same thing. So feeling is present moment based. Emotion is from the past. And so again, with practice, it's understanding the difference between when something comes up, and there is that, whether that is an emotion or whether something's happening and we're in present moment feeling. And we can generate those feelings, and that's how we can create change in ourselves, in our environment and in our world, is with intent and feeling, and that's a practice. And that's something that we have, those processes that I've just gone through, that sort of close focus, open focus, heart and intent, is what we use in the dance to create change and to expand out into all your potential. So our posture and movements have the power to transform your mental states. It's a complete transformation that goes on there. New ways of moving creates new ways of thinking. And this is shifting. It's so powerful that we don't get fixed. So even sort of within a lot of free dance, you can get stuck into the same sort of patterns and movements. So you can imagine we are creatures of habit. We are all creatures of habit. And you can zone those to the big things. It's like, which way do you sort of like go around the supermarket? When I have the studio, people like to be in the same place on the mat. So we're creatures of habit. But then it actually comes down to more and more close focus of what those habit movements are with your body, your postures, your gestures. It could be tiny, tiny things. So we look sometimes in the dance at how we were moving, the difference between holding a posture where you're in all your magnificence, and then to shift that from being in all your magnificence to then opening your eyes and have everybody looking at you. And what's the shift that may happen in that? When I say everybody we work with, could be just that, could feel for some people you can feel that straight away, without me saying any more. I've just suddenly had a sense as I've said that. If you were with me and present as I said that, you're in magnificence, and then knowing that people will be then suddenly, for some people straight away you may notice that, and it's a body change, even if that body change has gone from there to there, and that is noticing your postural habits and movements, and that's what can bring so much change. And again, we talk, many of you are familiar with why that isn't good, that we now spend so much time on mobile phones, on laptops. The whole postural thing is just dropping, and this does impact on our mental well-being. It is our emotional well-being. This changes. Look at what this actually is saying posturally about this, as opposed to what this is actually saying. And that's a feeling. That's present moment feeling. And in the dance, that's what we express and go through. It's present moment feeling. And gestures, and there's been classes that I've had, and that with the dance, that simply the gesture, how often do you put your arms into here and do this? This is not you see it sometimes in a lot of promotion adverts, people sort of like, I don't watch TV, but you see all the glorious images, it's like this. But how often do you actually experience that? And just have a go now. It's like, and it's eyes, facial gestures. Again, it's all vagus nerve. This expression here, it's like, it changes the feeling, not the emotion, changes your feeling that's happening in present moment. And I said that is so powerful. And in classes, I remember sometimes when people have come for the very first time, and there's been tears and tears, because this is also about being seen. It's about confidence, being seen, taking up space. It's a very, very powerful gesture. And like I said, we've had people in class that there's just been tears. There's a whole. So the dance isn't just about some sort of like funky moves that sort of like bring sort of endorphins, which is fantastic. We do have that as well. It's a lot of playfulness. Laughter is one of the most powerful healers that we have. It's so good for the immune system, so well-being. It's a great, if you've done laughing, it's a great workout in terms of like all your core. So we have, we introduced that into the sessions, so laughing, we've seen the laughing yoga. So it's deeply powerful, as in gestures as are. Sometimes, you know, if you're in fight, flight or freeze, sometimes to break out of that, there's some things is just like shaking the body, because if you've gone into freeze response, or again, gestures can be learning to just have your hand and be, even if you're not actually the person and you're imagining this can be really powerful to stand there and just go, if you just practice that now, and it's these type of gestures that bring a change and a shift and empowerment in the dance. It's such a powerful thing. So remember, sort of new ways of moving creates new ways of thinking. So that's a little bit about how we move sort of in the dance. We also teach Pilates and yoga, and we work with somatics. And as we explained before, somatics is the awareness of your body and your somanaut, your internal astronaut. And somatics, Hanna somatics is from Thomas Hanna, is the system that we work with. And that explains sort of for a muscle needs to have full expansion to be able to fully contract, and that is muscle tone. So often what happens is in stress and tension times, these muscles get tight and then they never fully get chance to release back out to maintain. It's a bit like an elastic band, and it just loses its elasticity because it's just exercised, squeeze, release, squeeze, release. It never, and it's not the same as stretching. Somatics and this pandiculation is very different from stretching. We are not pushing out, it's this squeeze. And it's yawning, it's a yawning squeeze. So it's the squeeze that reaches out into it. And that actually is the origin of yoga. If you talk about like things like downward dog, and you watch how animals get up and they do this up, down. But what it comes with is this squeeze sensation. So if you feel it now and imagine, just have a go, squeezing into your body, and as you keep the squeeze on in every part of your body, as you find somewhere to push in and fully length. And then once we've done that, we just come back into squeeze and then release. And this is this lovely open close. And this is also with the breathing and the diaphragm, which brings me to this little toy here I've got, which we were talking about, three-dimensional. So breathing is everything. Breathing is the breathing in, is the very first thing you do the moment you're born, in breath. Anybody who's had children, and the moment of birth, when the child is that in breath, is the very first thing. And hopefully nowadays that happens more natural, I think, with natural birth coming around, and rather than forced breathing. It's a lovely moment, it's that moment that the child takes the first breath. And the exhalation is the very, very last thing. So that anybody's been fully present and mindful with somebody dying, I know that can be in various different ways if that happens, but the out breath is the very last thing that happens. And all that in between is the journey. So it's the breath is everything. And we hear talk a lot now about belly breathing, and that's really over simplistic. Belly breathing, yes, we need to belly breathe, but it's also in the way that it requires muscle tone. So if you're permanently distended, or you've got your colon and you've got bloating is there, that's going to be distended. Or simply you just have belly breathed all your life and everything, or you've got tension in your chest, in your back, nothing else is moving, and this is the only place the air can go to. There's no muscle tone here. So, but it's not as simple then as just them trying to get rock hard abs. We're not aiming to do that. We're aiming to have this full extension and contraction of the muscle. And then what that requires us to do, which brings us this, is three-dimensional breathing. So this thing, and again it's unfortunately we're on a screen, so I'm hoping you get the effect of this. Maybe I should do it over the shadow. Is when you take a breath in, it's this 3-dimensional breath in and breath out. So as you breathe, take a deep breath in. It's not just at the front, it's at the sides. And it's not just at the sides, lateral breathing, which we do a lot of in Pilates. It's also at the back of you. How many of you have been aware, if you take a deep breath in, I can spin this round. How many have you been aware that you breathe into the ribs in your back? Breath in. So have a sense now as you're breathing, how much awareness. And if you've got a lot of tension and a lot of rigidity, maybe just going to go, oh no, I'm just not aware of that at all. It's like, and you're breathing. And this is, when we have 3-dimensional breathing, the whole posture of your body is going to, if you've got winging scapulars, tension up here, rounding in the back, weak pelvic floor is often a result of that, because this is all locked up, and then if you're trying to get tight abs on top of this and keep this tight, the only place that pressure is going to go is just down on the pelvic floor as well. It's a really common problem with the pelvic floor problems, is that it's the only place, because we're people trying to hold this tight and it's just like pressure's going down here. And again, the pelvic floor is the same. The pelvic floor, to be fully functioning, needs to have full elasticity. Relax and full contraction to squeeze, and release as you breathe in. Breathe out. Feel that squeeze into your pelvic floor. And how much can you fully relax the pelvic floor? But again, like I said, if you've got all this tension in different places, and it impacts so much. I mean, again, if you've got sort of weak, if this core here is not weak, if you get low backache, piriformis, SI joint, all around down to the back of the pelvis. Again, this is all caused by your transverse abdominis and your internal external obliques being just really sort of weak in not having this full range. But again, it's not about being they're just being locked up. And again, sort of like having this overextension. This is when in pregnancy, this splitting here of the rectus that you can get, and gapping here of the linea alba that comes down here. The reason why there's problems sometimes with bringing and returning that back is because this is constant. There's too much, belly breathing that's gone on here, rather than all this space, that 3-dimensional breathing into the sides of the ribs and the back. I mean, the diaphragm for breathing is attached to this bottom rib all the way around here. And if you feel now into your back, these bottom ribs here, how low down that is. Just take your fingers now and have a sense of how low down that is. That is your breathing muscle. Your diaphragm is attached to the bottom. So have a moment of thinking, wow, that's the place where the muscle is that actually breathes, right down here. We practice that a huge amount in our sessions at Energy Body. So that's quite a lot of information there in a very short period that I've put in there. There's so much more. I'm wondering how much longer to talk for, because we could then go on about the vagus nerve when you go into really deep breathing. And the vagus nerve is the one that will bring us back into connection, helps us relate. It is that rest and restore. It's what will help us digest our food. So the vagus nerve is connected to the digestion, our breathing, eyes, facial, ears. So this is it's a huge area now in terms of looking at the vagus nerve, and in terms of how that brings about our well-being in life. So thank you very much for listening. I will be doing a session. I have live sessions on 10 sessions a week we do at the moment live. We're waiting for the dates. We have got dates to reopen the studio. We're putting lots of things back in place. So I think that's the 25th, 26th, 27th of July that we're due to open Energy Body. So you please feel free to have a look at the website, which is just energybody, spelled BODI.com, or message me personally if you've got any questions. We are going to continue with our live sessions now. We've spent ages getting this set up ready. So if you would like to, if you're still feeling that you want to stay home, you can see all these sessions live in your own home. We do give an opportunity to connect. It is that connection, connecting with other energy bodies and having friendships, communication. And yes, so that's where we are. So I will be doing a dance session later on today, if anybody would like to join me for that. And I